All right, in this video, we want to take a look at a service. What the service is going to do is, if you remember our running for brews locations, we want to have a event code, a unique code for each location. So when the thought is when the runner goes to the location to check in, the organizer of the run is going to be able to give them a code to check in. So that's going to be a unique code for that day, for that event that they are checking into. So what we're going to do is allow the system to generate that code, and we're going to set up a scheduled process to do that. So every day we want to go and look for running for brews locations that have a run scheduled for that day and generate an event code for that. So this is what the class that's doing that. So you can see I created it as a service up on line 21. I'm using the Spring Stereo type of service. And I did not implement an interface because this guy isn't going to get injected to anything. So it's just going to be a regular Spring component, good old Spring Bean. And you can see on line 28, I am taking in the location repository and the event repository. And as a reminder, that is going to get automatically auto-wired by Spring. And on line 35, you can see that I'm using the scheduled annotation. So this is going to follow a Unix or Linux cron tab style of expression. And the first line on line 35, I have it running once per second. And I set it up that way so that we can see it actually running. And you can see that I've also added in some debug statements so we can see what's happening on this. And what I want to do is I want to have this run once an hour ultimately. And I'm doing it that way. Technically, it only has to run once per day, but I'm going to do it once per hour just in case there's system maintenance or something like that. And for whatever reason, if it's not running at midnight, no event codes would get created. I just added in some logic in here to only create the event codes if it doesn't exist. So pretty simple thing to do. It's not an expensive thing to run at all by any means. If we had hundreds of thousands of locations, might want to rethink this a little bit, but running for brews, they have 40 locations, so this is going to run in a blink of an eye. So no performance concerns there. Running it once per hour is going to be perfectly fine for our purposes. So let's take a closer look at what's going on here. So on line 40, I go out and get a list of the running for brews locations that have runs scheduled on that day of week. Now, on line 44, I'm going to walk that list of locations, and for each location, I'm going to query to see if an event exists for that day. And you can see on line 48, if it does not exist, it's going to be a null value. I'm going to go in and create the event. Now, I set up an event. You can see that I'm associating the location and doing the local date of now. And then on line 54, I'm using an Apache library to generate a random alphanumeric number, 10 characters long, and I'm going to do a 2 uppercase on it. Just make it a little bit more readable, and we don't care about matching the case on that particular string. And then we're going to go save it and log it, and I'm also doing some log output there on line 60, so if we fall through the event already exists, we're just going to note it in the debug log saying, hey, it already exists. Now, a couple other things that I want to point out to you guys in this video. I did implement a couple custom finders here using Spring Data. So I'm a big fan of Spring Data JPA. It reminds me a lot of the stuff inside of Grails. And on line 19 there, you can see that I set up a method and I'm doing a find by RFB location and event date. So I'm going to return back a single event, and I'm going to pass in an RFB location and a local date. Now, the implementation of this is going to be handled by Spring Data. So kind of cool. Spring Data is going to form the query for us and return back that object for us. Also on the location repository, I added 2 of these. I forget the exact name for it. I want to call it dynamic finders, but it's not that. I added a couple of these query methods. So I'm doing a find all by run day of week. I pass in an integer to get back the location. And I'm also doing a find by location name. Now I did add in a couple integration tests just to verify that these dynamic finders are working. So I added in an abstract repository test, and this is going to get all the repositories injected into it. And then let's take a look at the 2 tests that I have. And actually, in hindsight, the way this is running, initially I was going to do a Spring Data JPA test, which would not run it. And let's actually try that. See if it runs that way. Nope, it doesn't. We're not going to be happy there. So let's undo that. Not sure if it's going to load up the Spring context right. The JHipster stuff has a fairly complicated configuration. So no, it's not going to be happy that way. So let's undo that and go ahead and run him now. So this is going to bring up the entire context. So it is a pretty heavy test to run because we are running a true integration test, and we are bringing up the full Spring context and the full JHipster Spring context. So if I was doing a lot of this, I'd probably write a custom Spring configuration to bring up just the slice that I needed to make our tests run a little bit more efficiently. But this is more for demonstration purposes. So then we also have the location test. So just running a couple minor tests and clean that up a little bit. Now let's go ahead and run the application. I'm going to jump over here to the command line. We will run it. And while that is coming up, I want to show you guys one other thing inside here. As far as logging configuration, you can come down here, log level, and then set it to the class name. So I'm doing debug on com.rfb.service, and I was also picking up chatter for AOP logging, so I switched that over to error. So we don't get all that noise and chatter in there. So let's come back over here, see if we are up and live. Almost. Swagger coming up. So now you can see that it did run right away. So you can see the SQL output there. Locations checking for it. And you can see that it created an event for us. And now this is going to be running every second. And you can see I'm getting the event exists for day already. So that message is showing up there nicely. So it's only going to create that event once, and that's going to be looking and see that it does not exist. Now let's take a look at the data. And let me refresh this. I'm in here, connect. And let's take a look at the RFB event table, run that. And you can see that I have longer event codes, and that's from the Bootstrap class. Remember in Bootstrap, take a quick look at that. For the event code, I'm coming in and using a random UID, so it's going to be a lot longer code. So I just did that for our Bootstrap testing. I don't think anybody wants to be typing in a full UID. That'd be rather cruel to do to people. So this is a much friendlier code to type in. I might even shorten that up to like 6 characters because we're not looking at something ultra secure or people trying to game the system for a free t-shirt. So you don't have to be overly paranoid here. Can make it a little more user friendly. But you can see that these first four records were created by the Bootstrap class, and then this last record was created by my event service. Now the one last thing I want to come over here before checking this code in, come back to my event code service, and I am going to comment out this and change it so that it runs once per hour. So this scheduling annotation is going to run at the top of the minute and at the top of the hour every day of the week. So that's what the rest of it says. So run once per hour at the top of the hour. So this will run 24 hours a day, once an hour, and generate our event codes. And the Spring scheduling stuff is pretty rock solid. I'm not worried about it not running. So that is a complete overview of our event service. One last thing that I want to add before I forget, we were having a problem with the mapstruct annotations, IntelliJ detecting them. I did a little further research, and if you want to see more about the issue, here's a URL you can check. And this is a workaround that a guy wrote up, and I put it into the project. And basically, it is, long story short, of what it's doing is telling IntelliJ how to see the classes generated by mapstruct. So this saves it, because I added that because when I started running the integration test from inside of IntelliJ, it wasn't seeing the mapstruct classes, and it was failing. So looked into the issue a little more, and I found this workaround. Hopefully at some point in the future, IntelliJ or JetBrains figures out a way to address this permanently. So it has been happening for some time. They probably will get to it. Now, I do use mapstruct with Maven. It is not a problem with Maven, so it is specifically with IntelliJ and Gradle. So mapstruct, IntelliJ, and Maven are happy together. It's something to do with the Gradle project structure. So, but there's a little patch there, so watch for that coming into the source code if you're having problems with the mapstruct generated classes.